Good afternoon, students. Welcome to the first presentation for CRE1501, Creativity in the Early Years. I am your lecturer, Dr. Ayesha Carrim, and I will be supporting you through this module. Okay, so the purpose of this presentation is basically to give you contents and outcomes of Learning Unit 1 and give you a brief introduction to help you become more familiar with the content of Learning Unit 1, especially since assignments are going to expect a lot out of you, in terms of the quiz that you are already currently doing, as well as your written assessment that will follow. Okay, so Learning Unit 1 is what it means to learn through the creative arts. So you will find yourself, always having an introduction that gives a good context to the learning unit. And then we're going to look at exploring the meaning of creativity, developing creativity in early learning, as well as some theoretical insights into creativity. We also need to look at the importance of promoting creativity in early learning and also looking at reflecting on the entire unit as a whole. Okay, so the outcomes of this learning unit is basically unpacking the term creativity, understanding the relationship between creativity and learning, identify what comprises, the creativity arts within an early setting, and to show an appreciation for the creative arts in general and specifically for their value in early learning environments. And you also need to be able to explain the value of incorporating the creative arts into early learning programs. Okay, so each learning unit starts with key concepts. So just understanding what creativity is, understanding the relationship between creativity and learning, creative arts and appreciation, as well as imagination, is something that you need to understand before diving into this learning unit. This is because, there's a lot of concepts that, may confuse you, and it would be in your best interest to understand it and give yourself examples, just so you have a better, broader understanding of these key concepts. So if we look at creativity, it comprises of different aspects. You need to have students, encourage students to have new ideas, help them adapt old ideas, do something different in the classroom, let them be original and use their imagination, especially in early learning. It's very important. When we're looking at the relationship between creativity and learning, this is a fundamental relationship. Creativity supports, extends, and enhances learning. And when we look at creative arts as a whole, this is basically thinking of movement, dance, drama, music, visual arts. All of these are, part of creative art, and it's basically a wide variety. It's not only just drawing and things like that. Appreciation. Remember, we want our students to be recognized and basically enjoy the good qualities of something that they've done. That's why we see in a lot of early childhood classrooms where whatever they've drawn or created put on the walls, on creativity walls, or, just on display, just to make them feel good. Imagination, is the ability of the mind to be creative and resourceful. We want them to think about images as well. And it's a lot of things that you need to consider when creating a lesson on creative arts. Okay, so to introduce you to creative arts, remember all children are creative, and this creativity should be appropriately harnessed to ensure optimal learning and development in children. Therefore, I would say it is imperative that teachers of young children realize the importance of developing creativity in young children and teaching creatively. So remember, creative teaching strategies should be included in all your teaching practices. When caring for your young children, this refers to how teachers interact with our young children and their families daily. And this includes how teachers engage with them. So remember, as students, you need to, when you're in a classroom, you need to encourage active participation. Consider activities that, and think about what you're planning in early learning environment. In addition, early learning teachers should have relevant knowledge and skills to plan and implement stimulating creative art activities in the early learning context. And this is what this module will do for you. So if you look at, it's very essential for teachers to understand the value of creative behavior and appreciate the creative arts as if an effective educational tool. So this unit is basically, looking at the meaning of creativity in the 21st century, especially in early childhood education, looking at the different disciplines within the creative arts, as well as theoretical concepts that inform creative learning, and also the importance of creative learning and teaching in the early childhood development. So it's a very interesting chapter, and I'm hoping that you enjoy it. So now we're looking at exploring the meaning of creativity. Remember, creativity is not easy to define, as it comprises of many different aspects. We look at Gardner, 2006, the father of multiple intelligences theory, who acknowledges that creative thinking is part of people's intelligence and cognitive functioning. Creativity comprises of many different aspects, and this can include the ability to have new ideas, to adapt old ideas, like we said, and to do something differently and to think in a different way, be original, and to use one's imagination. All of the key concepts that we've noted in the previous section. So every child is born, remember, with creative potential. It's not something that is given to a few so-called talented people. So remember, creativity is expressed in many ways. Every child is different. So you really think about that. So when you look at I think there's a table to complete on page 20. You're completing the table and add names of people who are recognized talented and creative people. It's just to get you to witness some examples that you can also give in the classroom as well. So points to ponder, if you look at a story that's written on page 21, the red group, age 4, were doing the theme transport. Children were given a large sheet of paper and asked to draw their favorite means of transport. As you know, young children draw their images from their perspective. As they see the object, the teacher asks each child what it was they had drawn and wrote the name given by each child on their drawing. As expected, children said cars, taxis, buses, and even a tricycle. So all means of transport that had been talked about during the theme discussions. So one little boy drew something very different. He said it was a cup and saucer. So the teacher was puzzled, but instead of saying, "This is not what I asked you to draw," she asked John, "Why are you saying a cup of saucer is a form of transport?" John very confidently said, "Because this is how tea is transported. My mommy carries her tea in a cup and saucer." So you need to really think about, the different type of things that our kids can think about, especially using their imagination and their own ideas from home or wherever they, thought about this. So this story highlights some essential aspects of supporting creativity in early childhood. Firstly, it is a good example of sound early learning strategies. Allow and give children, the freedom to draw what they think is relevant and appropriate. Secondly, always ask children what they have made and listen. You listen and react positively. Don't shut them down. Let them explain, and you could write on the child's drawing. Thirdly, do not curb young children's curiosity and spirit of inquiry. What this young boy clearly illustrated was his ability to think out of the box. In other words, make use of higher order thinking skills to think creatively. So, we would think he was completely wrong, but we need to also understand what the explanation is. So do ask questions. And activity 1 is basically asking you to identify a creative moment, where you think back to your own teaching context, or the next time you interact with young children, you need to consider an example. This is what it means to be a thinking teacher. Identify an example of a child or children demonstrating aspects of creative behavior. And also you need to briefly give the context and describe the incident, explain why you consider this to be an example of creative behavior. So you're basically going to look at the activity on page 22. And remember, there will be platforms, like basically forums that you can add your reflection in. And it would be good to read others, students' ideas and thoughts on this, so that you can really learn from each other. Okay, so now we're looking at exploring your own creative potential. Remember, adults don't recognize their own creativity. Everyone has a creative potential, not just celebrities or artists. And we also need to think about how often you have either said or have heard people say, I'm not creative, I can't draw, I can't sing, I can't paint, I can't dance. However, we all have creative potential. It's not only superstars who demonstrate this creative behavior. So rethinking ways of learning and teaching is an excellent example of creative thinking. As ECCE teachers, you all have the creative potential. We often just need the confidence, to let out that specific talents and let ourselves shine for once. So one way of developing your confidence is by studying to improve your qualifications, which you are currently doing. At the same time, you are required to think deeply about your ECCE practices. This in turn will grow your confidence and develop your own inner creativity as a teacher. So we're looking at activity 1.2, where you need to reflect on your creative abilities. You're basically drawing a task using short parallel lines, and connecting them in some creative way. Secondly, you write a short reflection on how you felt when you read what the task required of you while you were completing the task, after you're completing the task, all of that. And you can post probably a completed picture under the forum that has 1.2 that will be created on the online space as well. So when you're really thinking about this, you undergoing a cognitive experience. You had to think somewhat in a different way rather than thinking in a vertical way. You required to really answer the question and respond, in that way. So you're using both sides of your brain, and it requires you to think in a more basically, yeah. So you just basically required to think in a more logical, rational way to unpack the reflective process. And to encourage creativity, people need to use different stimuli, experiences, and opportunities to unleash this potential. So this is what you need to do in the classroom. Sometimes you need to get your students to think in a more spontaneous way and in a more non-verbal, more intuitive manner. So this is all the things that you need to really think about. Okay, so let's look at an overview of the meaning of creativity by looking at Loris Malaguzzi, the founder of influential early childhood Reggio Emilia program. So this basically captures the meaning of creativity in 8 carefully worded points. So remember, I'm just shortening it here, but creativity is part of how we think, know, and make choices. It emerges from multiple experiences and freedom to explore. It also, basically going beyond the known, and there is access to meaningful personal resources. Creativity also expresses itself through cognitive, affective, and imaginative processes, and they come together, and support the skill of prediction and, arriving at unexpected solutions. It's also important to consider, interpersonal exchanges or collaboration with others. This includes negotiations of conflict and exchange of ideas. And also creativity flourishes when adults, in our case, we teachers, are less tied to prescriptive teaching methods, in terms of instruction and telling students what to do, but rather become observers and interpreters of problem-solving situations. Creativity is more visible when adults, us as teachers, become more attentive to the cognitive processes of children rather than worrying about the end product or the specified outcome. Like I gave an example, of that story where the student drew tea and cup. So, we didn't shun them out completely. And then you also have the expectations of teachers, adult schools, and the larger society determine the favorable or not encouraging of creativity in early in young children. Creativity basically thrives. Sorry about that. Creativity basically thrives when teachers are convinced that intellectual and expressive artistic activities extend and unify learning possibilities. These require friendly conversations and interactions with imagination and fantasy. So there's 8 of that. I think the 9 is just an error. It's supposed to go up. So you might be beginning to realize, that creativity is a very broad term applying to many different concepts and situations. We look at opportunities to stimulate our young child's creativity. And this should be built in early learning contexts, environments, and experiences. As a teacher, you should continually encourage creative thinking in the children in your classroom. For example, think of the type of questions you can ask them, the language and literacy experiences that you offer them, the type of topics, themes you share with them, and the different educational materials. And the recognition of different learning contexts and environments. You also need to develop creativity in young children and realize how important it is. And if you look at creativity, it's singled out as one of the 6 early learning development areas in the National Curriculum Framework, DBE, of 2015. So it's important, even in the NCF, creativity refers to the exploration and production of new and useful ideas and solutions to problems, challenges, get your students to invent things, find solutions, ask questions. And this is also very important to critical thinking and problem solving. So it's something that you really need to ensure that you also understand that creative arts in early learning, it's basically a collective term which encompasses several subject disciplines. Like I said, movement, dance, drama, music, visual art, and all of these are important in early childhood. It is presented in an integrated manner, so it's something that you really need to look into. Okay, so now we're looking at developing creativity in early learning. And although being creative requires the spontaneous, original expression of ideas and actions, it is not developed in a haphazard way. According to Gordon and Brown 2017, you'll also see that they create, the process of creating follows 4 predictable steps. So you're looking at the preparation, where gathering ideas and materials and allowing ideas to start forming. An example would be where you as a teacher set up an art station with different materials and discuss themes with the children to spark that initial thoughts, and ideas. And then you look at incubation period. This is stepping back, and letting ideas cook and develop internally without forcing solutions. You want to give children that quiet, open playtime to reflect, explore, and let their ideas evolve naturally. And the illumination means, that moment where ideas just come together, the aha moment of discovery. So an example is a child suddenly deciding how to complete their art or solve a challenge after reflection. So the teacher can support this by providing encouragement and asking open-ended questions. When you look at the verification phase, this means reviewing and testing if the idea works or makes sense, and with time and practice confirming its success. So an example is also giving children opportunities to present their ideas, display their work, explaining their thinking to others. So you can see how this creation phase makes sense now after our previous pointers. So if you look at our activity 1.3, you're basically going to watch a video which you can access over a link and use your own words to explain what is meant by each of these 4 steps. So if you do not know the meaning of these words, look them out up in the dictionary. It's very important to really understand the content and really reflect through the process. So some of the theoretical insights into creativity is very important to understand. This section explores cognitive and alternative understandings of creativity and how these support creative development in young children. So we're looking at Piaget, cognitive constructive approach, and children learn by assimilating and accommodating new experiences through active hands-on learning. Learning is constructed across various environments, codes, and simple systems, and context and environment play a key role in creative development. A reflection point, teachers should consider environments that are rich, stimulating, and provide materials and opportunities for exploration and problem solving. So this means, children, looking at children as active, hands-on learners. They construct knowledge and meaning across a variety of environments. So it's very essential that you encourage this type of environment. Vygotsky, a social cultural approach, emphasizes the social context of learning and scaffolding, support given by adults and peers. And also, the use of cultural artifacts and appropriate tools is key to cognitive and creative development. Examples of cultural artifacts that can scaffold creativity is traditional the traditional musical instruments, storytelling objects, using puppets, illustrated storybooks, cultural dress-up materials, local crafts and materials that reflect children's environments and heritage. So that's also important to do. And now we look at Howard Gardner, multiple intelligence, MI theory. Intelligence is multifaceted, so not limited to one type. Remember, there are 8 intelligences. So these are linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, musical, bodily, kinesthetic, intrapersonal, interpersonal, and naturalist. So each child learns differently, remember. And teaching should be flexible and learner-centered. So the MI theory encourages the teacher to be a facilitator, helping children solve problems, understand the concepts, explore ideas creatively. So teaching strategies based on this could use examples like in terms of storytelling, that's a linguistic intelligence. Instead, music and rhythm activities will fall under the musical intelligence and so forth. So it's very important that you really understand these varied methods and how they stimulate different intelligence and promote creative thinking in learning. Okay, so now we're looking at alternative insights into the development of creativity. As you know, we never focus on only one aspect of a child's development and in learning. So in young children, we emphasize the holistic development and learning as well as the integration of learning experiences. Thus, when we explore theoretical insights into creativity, we need to consider other approaches. Like, for instance, the psychologist Joan Erickson, the wife of Erickson, claimed that making sense of sensory input was essential for creative experience. Through the senses, children come to understand their surroundings, with a playful attitude. This is how they can form new and original processes and products. This understanding also emphasizes 2 other important principles of ECCE. And firstly, the importance of play and playful approaches to teaching and learning is recognized. And providing creative, playful opportunities for young children is essential. It's an essential element of developing creativity in young children. And we also need to understand the importance of sensory development at the foreground. As you already know from your child development studies, that sensory development is an important component of perceptual motor development and holistic learning. So emphasizing the importance of play and perceptual motor development is so important. And it's something that you also need to understand in terms of looking at healthy physical development, where you enable children to engage in creative play and bring in movement, music, games, dance, role play, all of which are essential to their creative development. So you can look at activity 1.4 where you need to watch videos. I'm not too sure if it's more than one video there, but you will need to at least, observe how babies and young children, how they play with a variety of different materials. And it also has many examples demonstrating the links between the development and creativity in young children. Okay, so we're looking at a table supporting development through creative play. So remember, for each group, babies, toddlers, young children, you need to record examples. So physical development, remember when it comes to gross motor development, you're thinking of climbing, crawling, jumping, all of those things that support large movements needed for dance, drama, active play. When you look at fine motor development, it's grasping, crayons, painting. It aids in precision and creative expression. hand-eye, foot-eye coordination, get them to catch a ball, stamping. These also support focus creative tasks in rhythm. When we look at perceptual motor development, things like spatial awareness, maybe navigating space, where you get them to dance or block play, things like that, it also supports creative movement and construction. When we look at temporal awareness, keeping the rhythm, following sequences, and this is where it aids the musical creativity and choreography and things like that. So sensory motor development combines senses with motor actions. Get them to paint with their fingers, listening and moving to music. Sensory perceptions, this is your visual, observing colors, patterns, encourages artistic creativity. When we look at auditory, hearing, let them respond to sounds, promote that musical creativity. And tactile touch is very important, using textured materials builds a creative exploration. And also, when we look at all of the smell and taste, where you can use it's basically using cooking, but you can have sensory games, that supports creativity and discovery and all of that. It's all very important. So how physical and perceptual motor development support creativity? Children learn through movement and senses. Like we said, every sensation triggers a response, and that inspires exploration and learning. So moving to learn and learning to move broadens curiosity, discovery, and creative thought. When it comes to sensory motor integration, the coordination between nerves and muscles, it develops over time and allows children to respond in a creative, integrated manner. And the creative arts, as a subject, is a natural platform for sensory motor integration, where children use multiple senses simultaneously to engage and create. Now we're looking at the Reggio Emilia approach, where it's an influential early learning childhood program from northern Italy, founded by Loris Malaguzzi after the World War II, and it's child-centered, viewing children as capable, curious, and driven by their interest to learn and explore. So basically, this learning environment is viewed as an important part of the learning process. In fact, Malaguzzi called it the third teacher, as it is through a rich and stimulating environment that children are actively encouraged to participate and explore, and in this way enrich and extend their own learning. So basically, Malaguzzi acknowledged that children show their understanding and express their creativity in many ways, which he referred to as the 100 languages of children. These languages include music, dance, movement, visual arts, oral language, pretend play, modeling, and any other means that children use to express their ideas. So these 100 languages necessitate a playful approach, towards teaching and learning. And this, as you know, is a hands-on approach that encourages the child to explore and discover through active participation. So also very important to go through, and you will see activity 1.5 that expects you to read a poem and name examples from Malaguzzi, gives to support his claim that children have 100 languages. So it's very important that you do this as well. We're looking at the importance of promoting creativity in early learning. And this is where, we look at cognitive, physical, perceptual, motor, emotional, and social development, and how they're all enhanced by creative experiences. So, when you look at the cognitive, imagination, higher order thinking, problem solving, this example of activities you can consider is provide boxes for imaginative creation, storytelling, solving puzzles, creative question asking. When you look at physical development, the gross motor, fine motor development, try to create obstacle causing, cutting and threading activities, climbing, dance. We look at perceptual motor. This is where spatial awareness comes into play, sensory development, visual awareness, get sensory burns, sand, water, balancing activities, exploring patterns and textures. When you look at emotional and social, this is self-confidence, making choices, collaboration, sensitivity, group art projects. This is an example of activities, role play, music circles, shared storytelling. All of these are so important in your classroom. When we look at creative arts, how they can offer additional learning advantages, in particular, offering inspiring, appealing experiences. And, this also adds to aesthetic experiences like emotional, spiritual, moral development of young children. And it actually brings joy and a sense of satisfaction to the child's day, which is, what we aim to achieve. And the arts provide an essential learning foundation, and this is where you can understand where, creative arts should be viewed as teaching strategies for other subjects. Creative arts deserve their own recognition as the development of children's artistic capacity, promoting aesthetic perception as well as creativity and invention, especially when our students create their own original masterpieces. It's really something so enjoyable in the classroom to see. Okay, so we finally get to the end of this presentation where we're just going to reflect and conclude. So as you reflect on the importance of how to develop creativity in early learning, consider your own understanding of creativity and the value you place in your teaching and the children's learning through the creative arts. So consider the following questions. When you reflect on creativity and the creative arts, what are the experiences or activities you consider to be most influential in shaping your attitudes to creativity? Also, how do you use experiences? How do those experiences influence your current early learning teaching and practices today? And to conclude, creativity touches every aspect of a child's development. It involves children's, teachers, and the learning environment. So creative experiences support the holistic growth of our young children. And it's very important that we really take the elements of creativity into all aspects of learning and teaching, and include play, learning, and teaching resources, as well as teaching strategies. And also consider our use of language so that we create an appropriate learning environment that supports creative development in young children. I hope this learning unit gives you a good indication of what this learning unit is all about. And thank you for listening to this presentation. All the best, students, till I speak to you again.